Thanks for making the time to chat with me today. We're talking today about your tiny home and the choices that kind of led you there and what it means for your life. So can you tell us a little bit more about the place?
It is 9 metres by 3 metres inside. I think 40 square metres is the technical definition for tiny living these days. So well and truly in that little sphere. And then just this veranda runs the whole 9 metre length up the side. The veranda actually folds up, and they stumped the land and got it all ready and then just brought it in on a normal truck.
What inspired you to go tiny in the first home?
I had a massive shift in my life I think it was 2007. I went to Africa for the first time, spent some time in Zambia, and I guess prior to that was a very consumeristic type person, and I just discovered this beautiful simplicity, I guess, in that place, and that led to a number of trips back, and then actually I worked there for a couple of years, and I just liked the idea of living a bit simpler, living smaller, just being a bit more globally responsible, I suppose. It hasn't sort of felt like a big sacrifice. I just really loved a small space. It makes me feel better. I loved the pace of life, and so I guess I liked the fact that when I could build this, it was very accessible to have a really slow pace of life if that's how I chose. Of course, that's not always how it works out when you come back into the bustle. I came away and started doing a lot of songwriting. I was in a band at the time, but I started this sort of fresh project that was really aimed at trying to make sense of what I'd seen in contrast to how I had been living in Australia. My bandmates and I all decided that we weren't going to buy any new clothes for the following at least the 12 months, just to try and start minimalising, predominantly just in that consumer part of our lives. And I found as I did that, I just felt better and better. There's really quite clear evidence scientifically that less clutter, less noise, all of those things actually are better for our overall health. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice at some point because the benefit just so far outweighs the cost of what you're doing, the metaphorical and the actual cost of what you're doing. It led to trying to simplify lots of other things, trying to eat out less, to cook at home, just things like that as well.
You said it started with just like feeling right, but has it tended to flow now, or does it tie into other ways that you're, I guess, more globally minded, as you mentioned?
Once you see this stuff, you can't unsee it. So sort of there is that natural progression where I have had a big focus, probably more recently, on just trying to only use green energy, just using less energy in general, even if it is from my solar. I've always had a great example from my parents growing up of generosity. And that's predominantly financial generosity and just the way our family lived and invited people into our home to share meals and things like that. And that all, sort of comes back around and ties into it as well. Quite simply, we just have a responsibility to each other. I'm far from getting it right. Like, I have found that I was a very, very pure minimalist for quite a while. But I found that even though I live in a tiny home, prior to living in a tiny home, everything I owned fit in a car. So this was almost like a palace when I moved in. And so I don't always get it right. I've got a few things at the moment that I'm sort of questioning, things that I own, things that I have. Is that too much? And they're hard questions in Australia because the reality is that we all have too much in this country. So I'm trying to hold every idea with grace, with as much grace as I can for myself and for everyone around me. Definitely in terms of trying to extend those ethics, it's a daily conversation in my own head of what that means for a number of different decisions in my life. From transport, we had some really interesting conversations about flying because I still fly quite a bit. I mean, not as much as I was when I was working full time, but really trying to nail down where I sit on those sorts of issues as well.
Have you had any naysayers or challenges on your lifestyle? Obviously, this is weird by standards here, but as you say, it's still abundant on a global scale. So curious what your experience has been there.
When I came home from living and working in Zambia, I came home about 10 years ago and I just was house sharing because that's what I could afford to do with some young women. And I was just saving money, and I used to drive past this block of land every day because I live just around the corner, and I saw it was for sale. And I think it's fair to say that it was on nobody's bingo card that I would ever own property or a house. And so my family were absolutely stoked that I finally was going to have something that I could live in. The big naysayers were the banks, which will come as a shock to no one. Trying to get them to see the value in what it was that I was trying to do was impossible, and I was very fortunate that my stepmum did a loan for a portion of the build that the bank refused to fund in the end. So otherwise I would have been stuck. Well, not stuck, but I just would have been paying off my land and continuing to house share to save enough money to do the build. Yeah, certainly everyone in my life just loves coming to this house. So it's one of those, and everyone's sort of amazed by something that's not amazing at all to me. So, which is always interesting. And I wish I had kept count of. I mean, it's the way we met. You just rolled up and we said g'day. I'd be in the hundreds now of people since I've lived here who've just come up to say hello, to say that they love my house, or so overwhelmingly a positive experience, I would say. Yeah.
Just by being authentic to your own kind of vision, you've really inspired other people, and I think that that's wonderful. Imagine if everyone did that. I like to, I guess, delve into people's thought processes and how the way they're living daily would affect how they see the broader world. So what would your dream future be? How would you see the world in, say, 5 or 10 years?
The dream scenario where everyone in the world has enough. And we know, we know that there is enough for everyone to have enough. It seems unachievable today, looking at just all the other issues that impact us as humanity. And so I think the most helpful way that I've been able to look at how I would like to see the world comes from my history as I'm an exercise physiologist, but I had a sort of the start of my career, I did a lot of work in the health promotion space, and the goals of health promotion are never to make the most unhealthy people in the world into the most healthy people in the world. The goal is always just to shift the entire population towards the better end of the scale, and that's very much the way that I look at some achievable things in the space of ethics and having enough. So, and having a dream scenario where more people have what they need would be for everyone just to have a shift in ideology, a shift in perspective, or even just a shift in behaviour, even if they're not there with the ideology yet, but just to understand the facts and figures of, if I change these things about my life and we have a collective shift, it just makes, the difference is astronomical that just that small shift would make. And because I myself, I think in the early days I went from one end to the other very quickly, but I'm very much just back in the middle now, trying to do things. I see the way that your family's living, it's certainly much further towards that other end of the scale than I live. I still live in a lot of conflict a lot of the time. For me, some of those shifts are really easy. Like I said, this, like a smaller way of living, using less energy, all of those things I actually find quite easy. The vegetarian one is interesting. I made a very conscious decision to be a vegetarian, not based on animal rights issues, but purely based on the environmental impact of eating meat. And my sister and I did it together, just came to that conclusion and that's one for me that still is a struggle. And sometimes I'll eat meat because I'm just craving meat, and it's still that. But I think the shift is most of the time I don't, and so it's. So there are some things that will come quite naturally to us, but I think in humanity we have to look a little bit outside that and do the things that are a little bit harder, and that's when we'll start to see a bit of a bigger shift. The interesting thing to me when we talk about trying to be an example and all of this, and it comes back to this health promotion philosophies and the science of behaviour change. And there's really clear science that humans will not, very, very rarely will change their behaviour if the impact is not immediate to them. When these issues come to wealthier nations, who are actually the nations that are causing most of the damage in the first place, it's not actually impacting us yet. So that theory of behaviour change, that's where it gets overwhelming to me, because we have dozens of things at our hands in a country like Australia that mean we won't actually see the consequences of our actions in my lifetime potentially, because we will see them, but we'll be able to offset them by our own comforts that we can afford to have. The further away the consequence is, the less likely people are. So we eat fatty foods. We know that the leading cause of death in this country is heart disease, but because the consequence is so far away, it doesn't change anything about how we live. So those are the things that I think are complicated in this space as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a dependence on kind of hope that there will be a solution for that in the future. Like, I don't need to worry about that now because I've got other things to worry about now, right? Like, I'm hungry, or or that thing tastes better than that thing. When you're talking about food. But I think that there is history of change where the change was unnecessary, and I think that the science says that it basically has to be more painful to stay as you are than to change in order for the change to happen. And I guess, wow, we really are just like pretty dumb organisms when it comes down to it like that. But that pain doesn't actually have to be physical or financial. It can be fear-driven or shame-driven, which are obviously very similar things there. And that sounds really negative because it is. But that can come about because the model that we have, the people who we aspire to be like, have shifted. And now to stay as we were is a risk. And that's where the shame will become, oh, maybe I won't be cool enough or won't be accepted anymore in the society to stay as I am. So I'm hopeful when you're talking about that, the shift in consciousness, so the shift towards more ethical living or more fair living, will create a large enough mass of people who are living in a really fair way that anyone who is not, well, the majority who are not, will shift out of fear. Not that we want that to be motivating, but there has to be some pain, as we say. So the pain imagined is, in terms of chemistry, the same as the pain actually experienced. So my hope lies in that area, that we can all shift enough that we get a critical mass to make the change. And I think the science says it's 3.5% of the population who really want something to change is enough to bring 25% along. And when 25% have changed, then the majority will follow. We all just follow models, and many people don't want to or don't trust themselves to veer off of that path. So they're looking at those 25%, well, whether they're conscious of it or not. Yes, and that as soon as it gets 25%, it feels the majority, and that's probably because there's so many different choices that 25% is a majority. The final question, getting back to kind of the tiny home and small living, is if I run into someone who's telling me that they're thinking about going for a tiny home, what sort of advice would you have for them from your own experience?
The best advice I could give would be to spend what will seem like an inordinate amount of time thinking about the space. And so I spent just an enormous amount of time thinking about every single thing I wanted to do in my house and where I would do that, about every single thing I wanted to own and where it would go, down to exactly where you need your power point to be. And in tiny living, that's not always where it would be in a normal house. So there's certain little spots where I have things because I knew that's where I'd predominantly be with my laptop, which might be which is my couch. It's not there's different things like that. So I would just think about everything you own that you're going to put in the space. So for me at the time, I knew I would always have a bike, so I had to be very intentional about that's a big thing to have in a small space. I now have 3 bikes in there, which is a nightmare, but knowing exactly where that hook on the wall would go so that fit there and it didn't disrupt the flow. I just think about what you want to do in it. And then the second thing is to don't think about it too long. So think about it a lot, but don't think about it for too long. And just if you know you want to do it, do it. I know a couple of people that live in small spaces, and I don't know anyone who regrets it. So would be the other thing I would say. And then the other thing I'd say is if you're building it and you can afford to get solar in straight away, because that's been a game changer for my bills. I've only had it for the last 6 months, but it's already cut my bills by probably 90% by my next bill. So.
Thanks. I guess that's particularly true with the electric car. So yeah, cut your cost down. Yeah, fantastic. Like, it's been really nice talking with you today, and look forward to catching up with you again.